What would you do if you discovered that the person closest to you was keeping a secret that would change your life forever? Rodrigo Rivera never imagined that on that rainy day in the Mexico City cemetery, he would uncover a truth so profound that his heart would never be the same again. Amid tears and wilted flowers, a confession waited to be discovered. Subscribe to the channel to discover this story that will touch your soul. Rain fell softly on the gravestones in the cemetery as Rodrigo Rivera walked down the familiar path to his wife's grave. 3 years had passed since he lost Maria Elena, but every Sunday without fail, he arrived with fresh flowers and a heavy heart. It was a sacred ritual for him, a moment of connection with the woman who had been his everything during 8 years of marriage. The 42-year-old millionaire had built a real estate empire, but none of that mattered without her by his side. His footsteps echoed in the damp silence of the morning as he held a bouquet of white gardenias, Maria Elena's favorite flowers. The cemetery was practically empty at that early hour, just as he liked it. He could be alone with his memories, his unspoken words, and the love that still burned in his chest. Loneliness had become his constant companion since Maria Elena left, leaving him in a mansion too big for a man alone. His friends insisted that he should move on, but Rodrigo didn't see how. Every morning he woke up hoping it had all been just a nightmare. However, reality hit him mercilessly every day. As he approached the white marble tombstone with the initials M engraved in gold letters, Rodrigo stopped dead in his tracks. A female figure was kneeling in front of the tombstone, crying silently. Her blonde hair fell like a curtain over her face, and her shoulders shook with each stifled sob. Paula, his maid, the 28-year-old who had worked in his mansion for the past 2 years. Rodrigo felt a mixture of surprise and confusion invade his mind. What was Paula doing there? She had never met Maria Elena, as she had started working for him a year after his wife's death. The young woman was holding a small bouquet of red roses and whispering words that Rodrigo couldn't hear from where he stood. Her work uniform had been replaced by a simple black dress, and she was clutching a rosary between her trembling fingers. Rodrigo watched as Paola delicately touched the tombstone, as if she knew the person resting there intimately. The scene seemed surreal to him, almost impossible to comprehend. "Forgive me, Mrs. Maria Elena," Paula murmured through her tears, unaware that Rodrigo was behind her. "I have taken care of him as you asked, but I don't know if I have been enough. He is still so sad, so lost in his grief." Her words struck Rodrigo like a bolt of lightning, and he felt the world sway beneath his feet. How could Paula speak of Maria Elena with such familiarity? What did she mean by, "as you asked me"? The businessman approached slowly, his leather shoes crunching on the damp gravel. Paula looked up when she heard the footsteps, and her green eyes met Rodrigo's brown ones. Terror seized her face when she realized she had been discovered. She stood up quickly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Mr. Rodrigo, I didn't expect to find you here so early," she stammered, trying to compose herself. Her voice trembled as much as her hands, and she avoided looking him directly in the eye. "I just came to—" But the words escaped her, lost in the knot of emotions in her throat. Rodrigo watched her closely, noticing details he had never noticed before. The way Paola looked at the grave with genuine reverence, how her tears seemed to spring from a deep and real pain. It wasn't the morbid curiosity of a nosy employee, but the pain of someone who had lost a loved one. Paola finally said in a hoarse voice, "I need you to explain to me what's going on here. How did you know my wife?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, but also like a plea. The young woman closed her eyes tightly, as if she wanted to disappear. When she opened them again, Rodrigo could see in them a mixture of fear, guilt, and something he couldn't identify. "There are things you don't know, sir," she said, her clothes or her Mexican accent more marked by emotion. Things she should perhaps have told him long ago, but didn't know how. Her confession hung between them like a promise of revelations to come. The rain continued to fall softly, as if the sky were also crying for the secrets that were about to come to light. Silence spread between them, dense and charged with tension. Rodrigo felt his heart racing as he waited for an explanation that he both feared and desired. Paula took a step back as if she wanted to listen, but something in Rodrigo's pleading gaze stopped her. "Sir, I didn't want you to find out this way," she murmured, looking alternately at the grave and her employer's confused face. The truth is, she began, but her voice broke again. Rodrigo took a step forward, the gardenias still in his hand, now forgotten. Paula, please, he begged in a voice he didn't recognize as his own. I need to know the truth. How is it possible that you know Maria Elena? The young woman took a deep breath as if gathering all her courage for what she was about to reveal. Her eyes filled with fresh tears, and for a moment Rodrigo glimpsed in them a pain that mirrored his own. The rain continued to fall, and the cemetery seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a confession that would change everything forever. Paula's answer was about to dismantle everything Rodrigo thought he knew about his life. She was his nurse, Suro Paula. And those three words hit Rodrigo like a punch in the stomach. The young woman wiped her tears with trembling hands as she continued. I worked at the general hospital during his last months of hospitalization. I was the one who took care of her at night. Rodrigo felt his legs tremble and had to lean on a nearby tombstone to keep from falling. All those days and nights he had spent in the hospital, all those nurses coming and going, and he had never noticed that one of them would become part of his life years later. But how is that possible? His voice was barely a whisper. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why do you work as a domestic servant if you're a nurse? The questions rushed through his mind like a torrent. Paula looked down, ashamed, because after she died, I couldn't continue working at the hospital. Seeing patients die became impossible for me. Her confession echoed in the humid air, laden with a sadness that Rodrigo was beginning to understand. Maria Elena had become more than just a patient to me. She was like an older sister. Memories began to flow from Paola's lips like water from a broken dam. Mrs. Maria Elena always greeted me with a smile, even on her worst days. She told me stories about you, about how you met, about the trips you had taken together. Rodrigo closed his eyes, imagining his wife in that hospital bed, sharing her most precious memories with a young nurse. She told me that you were the kindest man in the world, that you had a huge heart, but that you were too proud to ask for help. Paula smiled through her tears. She told me that she loved to wake you up in the mornings with the aroma of coffee, that you pretended to be asleep just to hear her humming as she prepared breakfast. Each word was like a sweet dagger in Rodrigo's heart, reminding him of details he had tried to bury in his memory. During the last few days, when the pain was very strong, she asked me to tell her about my family, about my dreams. She said it calmed her. Paula's voice softened until it was almost a whisper. I told her about my village in Michoacan, about my grandmother who raised me, about how I always wanted to be a nurse to help people. But there was something else, wasn't there? Rodrigo asked, sensing that the story was deeper than Paula had revealed so far. The young woman nodded slowly, her fingers nervously playing with the rosary she held in her hands. The night before she left with the Lord, she asked me to come to her bedside. She was very weak, but her eyes shone with a determination I will never forget. Paula paused, as if the next words were too heavy to utter. She took my hands and said, Paula, my child, I have to ask you a very big favor. Rodrigo is going to be alone, and he doesn't know how to be alone. He is a good man who deserves to be happy, but he is going to shut himself off from the world. Rodrigo felt a chill run down his spine. Those words sounded exactly like something Maria Elena would say. She asked me to find a way to take care of him, to be close to him without him noticing, at least until he could smile again. Tears were now rolling freely down both their cheeks. She knew I had lost my job at the hospital for missing so much work to be with her in her final days. The revelation hit Rodrigo like an avalanche of conflicting emotions. Anger, sadness, gratitude, and confusion swirled in his chest like a storm. So it was all planned, he muttered, more to himself than to Paula. Your arrival at my house, your job as a maid, it was all to fulfill a promise to my wife. Paula nodded, unable to look him in the eye. At first, yes, but then her voice broke. Then everything changed, Mr. Rodrigo. After really getting to know you, after seeing your pain, after... She stopped abruptly, as if she had been about to say something she shouldn't. Rodrigo looked at her intently, noticing the blush covering the young woman's cheeks. After what, Paula? He asked in a soft but insistent voice. The maid took a step back, shaking her head. I can't tell you that, sir. Not here. Not now. But Rodrigo had seen something in her eyes, something that disturbed and comforted him at the same time. There's more to this story, isn't there? Paula insisted. She looked at him with a mixture of desperation and longing that he didn't know how to interpret. Mr. Rodrigo, Paula whispered, looking toward Maria Elena's grave, as if asking permission from the woman who rested there. My wife gave me more than words that night. She reached into her purse with trembling hands and pulled out an old cell phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. She recorded a video for you. She asked me to give it to you when I thought you were ready to receive it. Rodrigo looked at the device as if it were a sacred relic. His heart was beating so hard that he was sure Paula could hear it. A video of Maria Elena asked in a hoarse voice, not daring to touch it. For 3 years you've had this and never... She couldn't finish the sentence. Paula interrupted him gently. She told me you would know when the time was right, that you would know when you were ready to hear not only her words, but also her last wish. Silence fell over them like a sacred cloak. The rain had stopped, and a ray of sunlight filtered through the clouds, illuminating Maria Elena's grave like a blessing from heaven. Rodrigo reached a trembling hand toward the phone but stopped inches before touching it. Was he really ready to hear his wife's last words? Rodrigo picked up the phone with trembling hands, feeling the weight of 3 years of silence. What else did Maria Elena tell me? He asked in a broken voice. Paula took a deep breath before answering. She told me that you were a man with a noble heart, but too stubborn to accept help. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. She said that after she was gone, you would close yourself off like a shell and reject any attempts by people to get close to you. The description was so accurate that Rodrigo felt a chill. She explained that she needed someone patient, someone who could be close without pressuring him. Paula smiled sadly. Someone who could take care of you without you realizing you were being taken care of. The gentle wind rustled the leaves of the nearby trees as if Maria Elena were present, listening to every word. That's why she asked me to look for work in her house as a domestic servant. The confession floated between them like a sacred revelation, but there was something else in her request. Paula continued, looking at the grave with reverence. Mrs. Maria Elena said to me, Paula, my child, I see something special in you. You have a pure heart and a strength that Rodrigo will need. Rodrigo closed his eyes, imagining his wife in that hospital bed, carefully planning his future. She explained that she couldn't leave in peace, knowing that you would be left completely alone. Paula's words resonated with the wisdom and love that Maria Elena had always shown. She said you had a lot of love to give, but that after losing her, you would refuse to love again. The young woman wiped away a tear. She asked me to promise that I would take care of you, that I would be there until you could be happy again. The commitment had been sealed with tears and prayers. I promised her that I would do everything possible to fulfill her last wish. And why did you accept? Asked Rodrigo, genuinely intrigued by the answer. Paula looked at him with eyes shining with emotion. Because Mrs. Maria Elena saved my life too. Her confession surprised Rodrigo. When I arrived at the hospital, I had just lost my grandmother, the only family I had. I was alone, sad and thinking of giving up everything. The words flowed like a river of painful memories. But her wife welcomed me as if I were her own daughter. She listened to me, comforted me, and gave me the strength to keep going. Rodrigo then understood the depth of the bond between the two women. She used to say to me, God puts the people we need and who need us in our path. Maria Elena's wisdom continued to resonate years after her passing. So when she asked me to take care of him, I knew it was my purpose to fulfill that promise. The conviction in Paula's voice was unshakable. Rodrigo looked closely at the young woman's face, noticing for the first time the absolute sincerity in her eyes. Then these 2 years began slowly. All your dedication, your patience, your way of taking care of every detail of the house. Paula nodded softly. It was all out of love for Mrs. Maria Elena and respect for her last wish. However, there was something else in her expression, something Rodrigo couldn't quite figure out. At first, it was just that Mr. Rodrigo, fulfilling a sacred promise. Her voice softened to a whisper, but over time, getting to know him, seeing his kindness, his quiet generosity, it stopped abruptly. Rodrigo felt his heart racing. What happened over time? Paula, he asked hoarsely. The young woman looked away, her cheeks flushed with emotion. Over time, everything became more complicated than I expected. Her words carried an emotional weight that Rodrigo was beginning to sense. "There's something I must confess," Paula murmured, looking back at the grave as if asking for forgiveness. "Mrs. Maria Elena didn't just ask me to take care of him." Rodrigo frowned, waiting for another revelation. "She also told me something that has haunted me for the past 3 years." The young woman closed her eyes as if the next words were too painful. "Paula told me, I know that Rodrigo will be able to love again, and I also know that you have the perfect heart to receive that love." The confession hit Rodrigo like a bolt of lightning. "I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time," Paula continued. "But now, after 2 years of living with you?" Her voice broke. Rodrigo felt the world spinning around him. "Maria Elena, she thought that you and I—" She couldn't finish the question. Paula looked at him with tear-filled eyes and nodded slowly. The revelation that was about to come would change everything he thought he knew about his late wife's plan. "Do you want to see the video now?" Paula asked in a trembling voice, holding the phone as if it were a sacred treasure. Rodrigo looked at the cracked screen and felt his heart stop completely. He had waited 3 years without knowing that there was a final message from Maria Elena. "Are you sure this is the right time?" he murmured, even though deep down he knew he had waited long enough. Paula nodded solemnly. "She told me I would know when to show you this. And I think after what you just discovered, it's time." Her fingers trembled as she navigated the phone's menu. She recorded it the night before she left with the gentleman when the nurses thought she was asleep. The device emitted a soft beep when it found the video file. "Mr. Rodrigo, prepare yourself to hear not only her words, but all her love." The screen lit up, and Maria Elena's pale but serene face appeared before his eyes. Rodrigo staggered and had to sit down on a nearby stone bench. "My love," began Maria Elena's weak but clear voice from the small screen. Rodrigo felt tears immediately well up in his eyes as he heard that voice he had missed every day for 3 years. "If you are watching this, it means that Paola kept her promise to take care of you." The image showed his wife in her hospital bed with a sweet smile despite her obvious weakness. "I know you must be angry with me for hiding this from you, but I needed to make sure you were ready to hear my words." Maria Elena coughed softly before continuing. "Rodrigo, my love, during these months of illness, I've had time to think about many things." Her eyes shone with a special light, the same light that had made Rodrigo fall in love with her from the very first day. "And what hurts me most is not leaving, but leaving you alone." The confession went straight to Rodrigo's broken heart. "I know your noble heart, but I also know your stubbornness." A mischievous smile crossed Maria Elena's sick face. "That's why I asked Paula to approach you." She continued recording while Rodrigo stared mesmerized at the screen. "But I didn't do it just because she's a good person, my love." Maria Elena moved closer to the camera as if she wanted to whisper a secret. "I did it because I saw in her eyes the same purity I saw in yours when we first met." Rodrigo glanced sideways at Paula, who was watching the recording with silent tears. "Paula has a huge heart, Rodrigo. During these months, she has cared for me as if I were her own mother." Maria Elena's voice was filled with affection as she spoke of the young nurse. "She has told me about her dreams, her fears, her loneliness after losing her grandmother." Every word revealed the depth of the connection between the two women. "And in every conversation and every gesture she made, I saw the perfect woman to give you back the happiness you deserve." The statement hit Rodrigo like an emotional tsunami. "I know this will seem impossible to you now, but trust me as you always have. Like this story if you're enjoying it. Your support helps us continue to create content that touches the heart." The recording continued with Maria Elena moving even closer to the camera. "Rodrigo, I want you to know that I'm not leaving jealous or worried about your future." Her smile was radiant despite the paleness of her face. "I'm leaving peacefully because I know Paula will take better care of you than I ever could." Rodrigo audibly sobbed when he heard those words. "She has the patience you need, the strength to put up with your temper when you get difficult." Maria Elena laughed softly, remembering their little marital arguments. "But above all, she has a heart capable of loving you as much as I have loved you." The deepest confession was yet to come. "I'm not asking you to love her right away, my dear. I'm just asking you not to close your heart when the time comes." Her eyes filled with tears of hope. "Let her in when you feel it's right. Give her a chance to make you happy again." The plea resonated in Rodrigo's soul like a blessing and a farewell. Maria Elena took a deep breath before uttering her last words. Paula, my girl, I know you're listening too. She looked directly at the camera as if she could see the young nurse. Thank you for promising to take care of my husband, but now I ask you for something more difficult. Allow yourself to be happy too. Paula sobbed softly when she heard her name. Don't be afraid to love Rodrigo if your heart tells you to. You have my blessing and my eternal love. The dying woman clasped her hands together as if in prayer. Take care of each other, support each other, and if God wants your hearts to find each other, don't fight against that gift from heaven. Her voice weakened noticeably. Rodrigo, my eternal love, I want you to be happy. I want you to smile again, to love again. Her last words were barely a whisper, and when that happens, I will know that my mission on this earth was complete. The screen went black, leaving Rodrigo and Paola in absolute silence. Maria Elena's words had just changed everything they thought they knew about their destiny. The silence that followed the video was deafening. Rodrigo stared at the black screen of the phone, as if he expected Maria Elena to reappear to explain the inexplicable. His hands trembled as he returned the device to Paula, who watched him with eyes full of expectation and fear. I need time, he finally murmured, his voice barely audible amid the wind rustling the leaves. Paula nodded understandingly, placing the phone in her bag with reverent care. I understand, Mr. Rodrigo. This must be very difficult for you. Her words sounded professional, but her heart was racing. Rodrigo stood up slowly, as if each movement required enormous effort. Let's go home, he said without looking directly at her. The walk back to the mansion was completely silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Maria Elena's words echoed in their minds, like echoes of a half-fulfilled promise. Over the next few weeks, the tension in the mansion was palpable. Rodrigo avoided being alone with Paola, coming home late and locking himself in his study until the wee hours. Paola continued her household chores with the same dedication as always, but now every gesture had a different weight. When she served him coffee in the mornings, their hands would accidentally brush against each other, and they would both pull on as if they had touched fire. Meals were spent in absolute silence, with Rodrigo reading the newspaper and Paola serving the dishes without looking up. Do you need anything else, sir? She would ask every night before retiring to her rooms in the servants' wing. No, thank you, he would invariably reply without looking up from his documents. However, both remained awake until the early hours, thinking about the other on the other side of the house. The revelation at the cemetery had changed everything, but neither of them knew how to process this new reality. The months passed slowly, turning the mansion into a scene of contained emotions. Paula noticed how Rodrigo would watch her surreptitiously when he thought she wasn't aware. During dinner, he would look up from his plate to watch her serve, studying her every movement with an intensity that made her blush. The food is delicious, he would occasionally comment, and those few words became Paola's most precious treasure of the day. Rodrigo, for his part, began to find excuses to be in the kitchen when she was preparing meals. I just came for a glass of water, he would lie, standing by the counter while he watched her cook. Their conversations remained formal, but their glances said much more than their lips dared to utter. The chemistry between them grew silently, like a plant blooming in the shadows. Both struggled with feelings they didn't know how to handle. The first anniversary of the revelation at the cemetery arrived without either of them mentioning it openly. Paula had marked the date on her private calendar, but she didn't know if Rodrigo remembered it too. That morning, he left the house early without eating breakfast, something completely unusual in his routine. Paula spent the day restless, obsessively cleaning every corner of the mansion to keep her mind occupied. When Rodrigo returned in the evening, he was carrying a bouquet of white gardenias in his hands. You went to the cemetery? Paula asked softly, unable to contain herself. Yes, he replied, placing the flowers in a vase. I told Maria Elena that you kept your promise. Their eyes met for the first time in months, directly and intensely. But I also told her that I don't know what to do with my feelings, he admitted, his voice breaking. Paula felt her heart stop. What do you feel, Mr. Rodrigo? She whispered. He looked at her for a long time before answering. Confusion, gratitude, and something else I dare not name. Rodrigo's partial confession opened a small crack in the wall of silence they had built. Over the next few weeks, their conversations became less formal, though they remained cautious. "You miss your town a lot, Paula," he asked one afternoon as she watered the plants in the garden. "Sometimes," she replied, surprised by his personal interest, "but this place has become my home too." Her words carried a deeper meaning that they both understood. Rodrigo began to ask her questions about her life, her dreams, her fears. Paula, in turn, dared to ask him about his work, his plans, his happy memories with Maria Elena. Slowly, very slowly, they began to get to know each other as people, not just as employer and employee. However, the romantic tension remained an elephant in the room that neither dared to touch. Their hands brushed against each other as they passed plates during dinner, and both felt emotions that left them breathless. The year of silence was coming to an end, but would they have the courage to face the truth of their feelings? Spring arrived in Mexico City, bringing with it subtle but significant changes in the dynamic between Rodrigo and Paula. The flowers in the garden began to bloom, and with them came a new warmth in their daily interactions. Rodrigo had started having breakfast at home again, and Paula noticed how he savored every bite of the huevos rancheros she prepared with special care. "My grandmother taught me to cook when I was a child," she said one morning as she served freshly brewed coffee. "She said that food made with love always tastes better." Rodrigo looked up, catching the implicit message in her words. "I can tell," he murmured, and for the first time in over a year, he smiled genuinely at her. That smile remained etched in Paula's heart like a priceless treasure. Breakfast became the most anticipated moment of the day for both of them, an intimate ritual that slowly brought them closer together. The invisible barriers began to gently crumble. The weekends brought a new routine that neither had consciously planned. Rodrigo began to stay home instead of going to the office, and Paola found excuses to spend more time in the common areas of the mansion. "I'll help you with those documents, sir," she offered one Saturday, seeing the mountain of papers on his desk. "Can you call me Rodrigo when we're alone?" he replied, surprising her. "And yes, I would love your help." They worked together for hours, organizing contracts and invoices, their heads occasionally leaning toward each other to review the same documents. The scent of Paola's soft perfume mingled with the smell of coffee, creating an atmosphere of domestic intimacy that vaguely reminded Rodrigo of the early years of his marriage. However, this was different. With Paola, everything felt natural, unforced, as if they were meant to work side by side. Their conversations flowed with an ease that surprised and frightened him in equal measure. One rainy afternoon while Paola was preparing dinner, Rodrigo approached the kitchen with an unexpected proposal. "Would you like to have dinner in the main dining room tonight?" he asked nervously, like a teenager on his first date. Paola blushed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Are you sure? I always eat in the kitchen," Rodrigo insisted gently. "The table is too big for one person. Besides, I'd like to learn more about your life in Michoacan." Dinner took place in an atmosphere completely different from the silent meals of the previous year. Paula told him about her childhood in the village, about her grandmother who sold tamales in the square, about her dream of studying nursing to help others. Rodrigo shared anecdotes from his early years as an entrepreneur, his failures and successes, how he had met Maria Elena at a real estate conference. For the first time, they talked about her without pain, remembering her virtues with affection instead of sorrow. The conversation went on late into the night, and they both realized they didn't want the evening to end. Small but significant changes multiplied over the following weeks. Rodrigo began to ask her opinion on decorating decisions for the house, valuing her natural aesthetic taste. Paula dared to suggest changes to the weekly menus, introducing dishes from her homeland that he loved. "These chiles in nogada are incredible," Rodrigo exclaimed during a special dinner. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Paula smiled proudly. "My grandmother used to say that a woman who knows how to cook can win any heart." The words hung in the air, laden with a meaning that both understood but neither dared to address directly. Their gazes lingered for a few seconds longer than was appropriate, and Paola felt herself melting under the intensity of Rodrigo's brown eyes. He cleared his throat nervously and changed the subject, but the moment had been etched in both their memories. The romantic tension grew day by day, like a tide rising slowly but inexorably. The situation reached a critical point one stormy night. The power went out throughout the area, and Rodrigo came down from his room with a flashlight, to check that everything was okay. He found Paola in the living room, curled up on the sofa with lit candles around her, watching the rain beat against the windows. "Are you afraid of storms?" he asked, sitting at a safe distance, but noticeably closer than usual. "A little," she admitted. "When I was a child, my grandmother used to tell me that storms were when angels reorganized the sky." Rodrigo smiled at the sweetness of the anecdote. "And did you believe her?" Paola looked at him with eyes shining in the candlelight. "I still believe her. I believe that some storms come to change the things that need to be changed." A flash of lightning lit up the room at that moment, and they both felt that the universe had orchestrated that moment perfectly. Rodrigo slowly reached out his hand, and when Paola didn't pull away, he intertwined his fingers with hers. They stayed like that for hours in silence, feeling their hearts beat in unison as the storm raged outside. That night, they both knew they could no longer deny their feelings for each other. 2 weeks after the night of the storm, Paola made the most difficult decision of her life. Every morning she woke up hoping that Rodrigo would mention what had happened between them, but he seemed to have returned to his usual distance. Breakfast returned to silence, although now it was a silence charged with tension and unspoken words. "Good morning, Mr. Rodrigo," she would greet him every morning, and he would respond with a simple, "Good morning," without looking up from his newspaper. However, Paula noticed how his hands trembled slightly when she served him coffee, how he avoided looking her directly in the eyes. The connection they had felt that stormy night was still there, vibrating between them like a high-voltage wire. But Rodrigo seemed determined to ignore it, and that was slowly breaking Paula's heart. She could no longer live on that emotional roller coaster, waiting for crumbs of affection from a man who was clearly fighting his own feelings. The last straw came on a Tuesday afternoon when Paula overheard Rodrigo talking on the phone with his accountant. "Yes, I think it's time to make some change in the house," he said from his study. "Maybe hire a professional cleaning company instead of, well, you know." Paula stood frozen in the hallway with the basket of clean laundry in her hands. Rodrigo was considering firing her to avoid the awkwardness of the situation between them. Tears began to roll down her cheeks as she realized that it was easier for him to get rid of her than to face his feelings. "I can't go on like this," she muttered to herself as she headed to her room. That night, while Rodrigo dined alone in the main dining room, Paula wrote her resignation letter. The words flowed through her tears, explaining that she had decided to return to Michoacan to care for a sick aunt. It was a lie, but a necessary one to preserve the dignity of both of them. She knew that if she told him the truth, that she was leaving because she couldn't bear to love him in silence, everything would become even more complicated. The next day, Paula waited for Rodrigo to finish his breakfast before approaching him with the letter in her hands. "Mr. Rodrigo, I need to talk to you," she said in a firm voice, even though inside she was falling apart. He looked up, immediately noticing the seriousness in her tone. "What's wrong, Paula?" His expression changed when he saw the formal letter in her hands. "I've decided to resign from my job here," she announced, handing him the envelope. "My aunt in Michoacan is very ill and needs constant care." The lie hurt her soul, but it was preferable to confessing the truth. Rodrigo took the letter with trembling hands without opening it. "When?" he asked in a hoarse voice. "I'll leave on Friday if that's okay with you. That will give me time to get everything in order and train my replacement if you already have someone in mind." Paula's professionalism contrasted with the emotional tornado raging inside her. Rodrigo looked at her for a long time as if he wanted to say something, but finally nodded. "I understand. I'll make the necessary arrangements." The following days were silent torture for both of them. Paola packed her few belongings with mechanical movements, while Rodrigo avoided being at home during the day. However, at night she could hear him walking through the halls of the mansion like a lost soul. On Thursday night, Rodrigo came home with a bottle of aged tequila and locked himself in his study. Paola could hear the clinking of glasses from the kitchen, where she was preparing her last dinner in the house she had come to love so much. Mr. Rodrigo dared to knock on the study door around midnight. "Your dinner is ready." He opened the door with glassy eyes and tousled hair. "I'm not hungry," he muttered, but his gaze devoured her as if he wanted to memorize every detail of her face. Paula started to speak but stopped, shaking her head. "Nothing. Good night." He closed the door, leaving her standing in the hallway with her heart broken. That was the last conversation they had before the time came for the final goodbye. On Friday morning, Paola took her suitcases downstairs and placed them by the front door. The taxi would arrive in an hour to take her to the airport. Rodrigo was in the kitchen drinking coffee and pretending to read the newspaper, but his eyes were red from a sleepless night. "I already called the taxi," she announced in a broken voice. "It will be here soon." Rodrigo nodded without looking up. Silence stretched between them like an unbridgeable chasm. Paula gathered all her courage to say the words she had been rehearsing all night. "Mr. Rodrigo, before I leave, I need to tell you something." He looked up slowly. "Over the past 2 years, you have become much more than my employer." Tears began to roll down her cheeks. "What began as a promise to Mrs. Maria Elena turned into something I never expected to feel." Rodrigo stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. Paula whispered, "I fell in love with you, Mr. Rodrigo," she finally confessed, releasing the words she had kept in her heart for so long. "And I know you can't return those feelings. That's why it's better if I leave." The sound of the taxi horn echoed in the distance, announcing that the final moment had arrived. The sound of the horn cut through the air like a knife, but Rodrigo didn't move. His eyes were fixed on Paola's tear-stained face, processing the words he had just heard. "What did you say?" he murmured, as if he couldn't believe what he had heard. Paula wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to maintain her composure. "I said I fell in love with you and that I understand perfectly well that you cannot return my feelings." Her voice broke at the end of the sentence. The horn sounded again, more insistently. "This time I have to go," she whispered, heading for her suitcases. But when she reached the door, she felt a strong hand grasp her arm. "No," Rodrigo said firmly, stopping her. "Don't go, Paula." "No, not like this." His brown eyes shone with an intensity she had never seen before. "We need to talk." The taxi driver honked the horn a third time, but Rodrigo paid no attention. "Tell him to go. I'll take you where you need to go later." Paula looked at him in confusion as Rodrigo went out to say goodbye to the taxi driver. "Change of plans," he said to the driver, handing him extra money for the inconvenience. He returned to the house and closed the door, leaning against it as if he needed that physical barrier to gather his courage. "Paula, for the past 2 years I've been lying to myself," he began in a trembling voice. "I told myself that what I felt for you was just gratitude for taking care of me, as Maria Elena asked you to." He slowly approached her, who remained motionless next to her suitcases. "I told myself you were just an efficient employee, pleasant company, a comforting presence in this empty house." His words came out in a rush, as if they had been held back for too long. "But I lied, Paula. I lied terribly to myself." He looked her straight in the eyes. "What I feel for you is not gratitude. It is not brotherly affection. It is not the comfort of having someone to take care of me." Her voice softened to a whisper, laden with emotion. "It's love, Paula," she finally confessed, and the words echoed in the mansion's entrance hall like a sacred declaration. "I am hopelessly in love with you, and I have fought against it because it seemed like a betrayal of Maria Elena's memory." Tears began to roll down both their cheeks. "But last night, listening to your footsteps as you packed your bags, I realized that Maria Elena didn't ask me to be unhappy forever." He moved closer until he could take Paula's trembling hands in his. "She asked me to be happy, and you, my love, are my happiness." The confession enveloped them like a warm blanket. "When you said you were leaving, I felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest." Their voices mingled in a whisper filled with years of repressed feelings. "I didn't know you were brave enough to confess what I didn't even dare to think." Rodrigo gently caressed Paola's wet cheeks. "Forgive me for making you believe that I didn't reciprocate your feelings." Paola looked at him with shining eyes, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You really love me," she whispered, as if afraid it were a dream from which she might wake up. "With all my heart," Rodrigo replied, bringing his face close to hers. "I've loved you since that stormy night when I took your hand. I've loved you since those breakfast mornings when you smiled as you served me coffee. I've loved you since you began to fill the silences of this house with your laughter." Their foreheads touched gently. "I love you, Paola Romero, and I want to spend the rest of my life loving you, if you'll let me." The young woman closed her eyes, feeling all the barriers she had built around her heart crumble like sandcastles. "I love you too, Rodrigo," she murmured against his lips. I love you more than words can express. The first kiss came softly and shyly, laden with 3 years of waiting, 2 years of silent coexistence, and a love that had finally found the freedom to express itself. When they parted, Rodrigo took Paola's hands and brought them to his lips, kissing them tenderly. I don't want this to be just a desperate confession to keep you from leaving, he said seriously. I want to do this right, Paola. I want you to know that my intentions are completely serious. She looked at him questioningly. What do you propose then? Rodrigo smiled, that genuine smile she had missed so much. I propose we start from the beginning, like two people who know and like each other, but who want to build something solid and beautiful together. His eyes shone with a new light, a renewed hope. I want to court you properly, Paula. I want to take you out to dinner, learn more about your history, introduce you to my friends as the woman I'm in love with. His proposal was so sweet and respectful that Paola's heart melted completely. I want us to leave behind the employer-employee relationship and start a new story as Rodrigo and Paula. He moved closer, looking at her with eyes full of love. Would you agree to be my girlfriend, my love? The question that would change their lives forever hung in the air, waiting for an answer that would seal their shared destiny. Yes, Paula whispered with a smile that lit up her whole face. Yes, I agree to be your girlfriend, Rodrigo. The answer sealed the most important moment of their lives. He lifted her in his arms, spinning her gently, as they both laughed through tears of happiness. Then I am no longer your employee, Mr. Rodrigo, she said, kissing his forehead. I am simply yours. Paula felt her heart could explode with joy. After 2 years of silent love, she could finally freely express her feelings. And I am no longer your employee, she replied, caressing his face. I am the woman who loves you with all her being. Rodrigo gently put her down but kept his hands on her waist. I want to take this step by step, my love. I want every moment to be special. His eyes sparkled with renewed determination. This afternoon you will move into the master guest room, and tomorrow night I will take you on our first official date. The proposal made Paola blush with excitement. That same afternoon, Rodrigo insisted on helping her move her belongings to the elegant guest room on the second floor. This is temporary, he explained as he placed her suitcases on the bed with Docell until we decide how we want to organize our life together. Paula gazed in wonder at the room decorated in cream and gold tones with a beautiful view of the garden. It's too elegant for me, she murmured, still overwhelmed by the change. Rodrigo took her hands. Nothing is too elegant for the woman I love, he said tenderly. Besides, I want you to feel like the owner of this house because that's what you are now. His words reassured her, but Paola still felt nervous about the drastic change. What will your friends think when they find out I was your maid? Rodrigo looked at her seriously. They'll think I'm the luckiest man in the world for having found you. His conviction was absolute, and if anyone dares to judge you, they'll have to deal with me. The next day, Rodrigo behaved like an excited teenager getting ready for his first date. He had made reservations at the most exclusive restaurant in the Zona Rosa. He had bought fresh flowers and carefully chosen his best suit. Are you nervous? Paula asked him from the staircase, looking radiant in a beautiful dress that Rodrigo had insisted on buying her that morning. Terribly nervous, he admitted with a smile. It's been years since I've asked a woman out to dinner. He approached her and offered her the bouquet of red roses, but he had never been so excited about a date. Paula accepted the flowers, inhaling their sweet scent. I haven't had many dates in my life either, she confessed. But with you, everything feels right. The comment immediately reassured him. During dinner, they talked like two people who had known each other forever, but who were also discovering each other at the same time. Rodrigo told her stories about his youth, about his frustrated dreams of becoming an architect before going into real estate. Paula shared stories about her childhood in Michoacan, about how she had worked since she was 15 to pay for her nursing studies. I always wanted to help people, she explained as they savored their dessert. But after losing so many patients, I thought I wasn't strong enough. Rodrigo took her hand on the table. You are the strongest person I know, he said with conviction. What you did for Maria Elena, what you have done for me, that requires extraordinary strength. His words moved her deeply. With you, I feel capable of anything, she replied. You give me a confidence I never thought I could have. The evening stretched on until the wee hours. Neither of them wanted it to end. When they returned to the mansion, Rodrigo accompanied her to her bedroom door like a perfect gentleman. "Thank you for the most beautiful night I've had in years," he whispered, kissing her hand softly. "Sweet dreams, my love." Paula lay awake for hours, reliving every moment of that perfect first date. Over the next few weeks, Rodrigo courted Paola with the dedication of a man who had found his purpose in life. He sent her flowers every day, took her on weekend trips to Xochimilco, and proudly introduced her to his business associates as his girlfriend. "She's the most wonderful woman in the world," he told them without shame. Paula, for her part, blossomed under so much love and attention. Her confidence grew day by day, and she soon felt completely at ease in Rodrigo's world. One Saturday afternoon, as they strolled through the garden of the house, he stopped next to the rose bush she had tended for 2 years. "Paula, there's something I want to ask you," he said with obvious nervousness. He knelt in front of her, taking a small velvet box out of his pocket. "I know we've only been officially dating for a month, but I've been in love with you for much longer." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant engagement ring. "Will you marry me, my love?" Paula screamed with joy, covering her mouth with her hands. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, as if it had always been meant for her. 6 months after the proposal, Rodrigo and Paola were married in an intimate ceremony in the chapel of her hometown in Michoacan. Paola had insisted that the wedding be held there, surrounded by the traditions of her homeland and blessed by the memories of her grandmother. The small church was filled with marigolds and white roses, while mariachis played softly in the atrium. Rodrigo, elegant in his black suit, couldn't take his eyes off his bride as she walked down the aisle on the arm of the village priest. Paula looked radiant in a traditional Mexican lace dress that had belonged to her grandmother. "Today, I'm not just marrying you," Rodrigo whispered during the exchange of vows. "Today, I'm fulfilling the promise that Maria Elena wanted for us, to be happy together." Tears of joy rolled down both their cheeks as they swore eternal love to each other. The guests, a perfect mix of Rodrigo's business friends and Paola's humble neighbors from the village, celebrated until dawn. The honeymoon on the beaches of Tulum sealed the beginning of their new life. Upon returning to Mexico City, the couple settled permanently into the mansion that was now truly their home. Paula transformed every corner with her warm and welcoming touch, blending Rodrigo's elegant antiques with colorful crafts from her homeland. "This house now has a soul," he remarked one afternoon, watching her arrange fresh flowers in the dining room. It had beautiful furniture, but it lacked life. Paula smiled, caressing her belly, which was beginning to show the first signs of her pregnancy. "Soon it will have even more life," she announced with a mysterious smile. Rodrigo looked at her confused until she took his hands and placed them on her stomach. "We're going to be parents, my love." Rodrigo's cry of joy echoed throughout the house. He knelt in front of her, tenderly kissing her belly. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "Thank you for giving me a complete family." The following months were a roller coaster of emotions, preparations, and a happiness that neither of them had imagined possible. Rodrigo became the most dedicated husband and future father in the world. He accompanied Paola to all her doctor's appointments, read books on parenting, and personally prepared the baby's room. "Do you think Maria Elena would be proud of us?" Paola asked one night as he gently massaged her swollen feet. "I'm sure she's celebrating in heaven," Rodrigo replied with conviction. "She knew exactly what she was doing when she put us in each other's path." The pregnancy went smoothly, and when little Elena Maria was born, they both knew that the circle had been perfectly closed. The baby had her mother's green eyes and the sweet smile that Rodrigo recognized from his wife's childhood photos. "She's perfect," Paula whispered, cradling her newborn daughter. "She's our blessing," Rodrigo added, kissing the foreheads of his two loves. When they left the hospital, they went straight to the cemetery. "Thank you, Maria Elena," Rodrigo murmured in front of the grave, while Paula held the baby. "Thank you for giving us this gift." 2 years later, when little Santiago came into the world, the Rivera Romero family's happiness was complete. Rodrigo had sold most of his commercial properties to devote himself more to the construction of social housing. It was a project that Paula had inspired with her stories about poverty in her village. "I want our money to help the families who need it most," she had said, "just as you helped me." Together, they created a foundation that built decent homes for low-income families, always with the philosophy that everyone deserved a home filled with love. On weekends, the mansion was filled with children's laughter as Elena Maria chased butterflies in the garden and Santiago took his first steps on the lawn that his mother cared for so lovingly. Rodrigo watched his family from the terrace, remembering the lonely days when he thought he would never be happy again. "What are you thinking about, my love?" Paula asked, sitting down next to him with Santiago in her arms. "I'm thinking about miracles," he replied, hugging her, "about how God sometimes uses the people we love to guide us to the people we need to love." 15 years had passed since that encounter in the cemetery that changed their lives forever. The mansion that once housed the loneliness of a widower was now home to a prosperous and united family. Elena Maria had grown into a young woman with her mother's sweetness and her father's determination. Santiago had inherited Rodrigo's entrepreneurial spirit and Paula's infinite compassion. Every Sunday, without fail, the entire family visited Maria Elena's grave, bringing fresh flowers and eternal gratitude. The tombstone no longer represented pain, but the starting point of the most beautiful love story they could have lived. Rodrigo had found peace with his past and happiness in his present. Paula had fulfilled the most important promise of her life and had received a family that loved her unconditionally. The years had shown that sometimes the most painful goodbyes are actually the most beautiful beginnings. Maria Elena had planted the seed of love between Rodrigo and Paula, and that seed had blossomed into a family blessed by God, full of laughter, hugs, and promises kept for all eternity. This story reminds us that true love sometimes comes in the most unexpected ways, and that promises made with the heart always find a way to be fulfilled. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in love. May God bless your path and allow you to find the happiness you deserve, just as Rodrigo and Paula found it through a promise of eternal love. Know